Northern Maine. This is a true story. My stepbrother and I were only 14 to 16 years old at our remote cabin in Maine. My stepmother is Native American, so the cabin is on tribal land. It is about an hour ride on old logging roads. To give you an example, there is no cell service, and you cannot hear anything, no noise pollution. There is 2 cabins on the little stretch of the lake. One to the left of us is run down, and the one to the right of us is kept up, but not the nicest. I always carry my 20-gauge shotgun when up there to kill small birds or rabbits. I had just gotten my .40 Smith & Wesson as my birthday present, and thought I was very cool walking around with it on my hip. I'd pull it out and shoot it at trees. I got pretty good before the trip. It was the first night. My father always brings the generator so we have power for the nights. The first night was fine, and with no incident. The second day my stepbrother and I went out riding on our ATV. I was driving, we were going pretty fast, we had just rounded this corner. And to the side of the road I noticed a man. The first thing that stuck out about him was his facial hair. His beard was stained a dark red like he had been eating something bloody. It was moose season, so we assumed that he had been gutting the moose, and blood had got on him. But he did not have a gun on him, so it seemed different. But then I just thought he left his gun by the kill. But then I thought that we had never heard shots, and how quiet it was we would hear gunshots. For some reason I stopped the van because of my age and how cool I thought I was. I suited my side, so he could see I have my Glock on me. He dismissed this, and we asked him what he was doing on this remote stretch of road. He then replied in a rough, deep voice, "Hunting." We then said, "Because we're dumb." "Well, that seems fun. See you, Miss Ta." And I sped off. When we were driving back, I let my stepbrother drive back. When we passed the spot again, I looked off into the thick underbrush. I did not see anything or anyone. We got back to the cabin, and I told my dad what had happened. He told me he was probably just hunting, and my stepmother seemed scared like always, and my father told her it was fine. A couple hours later, we were eating dinner and it was dusk, and my father, an avid fisherman, took him and my stepbrother out on the lake, while my stepmom and I stayed at the cabin. It was about 30 minutes before dark, and my dog Ginger was sleeping on the stoop. My father and stepbrother had still not gotten back yet. All of a sudden Ginger stood up, and with it being so quiet, I could also hear the sticks snapping and leaves rustling around. My stepmom was inside and did not do anything when Ginger barked. I, being the cool young kid, but also very scared of being so far out in the woods, ran into the cabin, got my stepmother, and told her what was going on, and she told me do not scare her. I reassured her I was not and to go down to the lake and get call for my dad. I was now scared because there was little to no light, and the generator was not on, and we had not started the fire yet. I yelled for Ginger to come back and she did, but she had a little bit of odor on her, which seemed to me to be different, but because of what was going on I was so focused on the woods I did not think of it. My father came up from the lake with a base in his hand and told me that it was an animal, and to not scared my stepmom like that. I told him it was not a joke, and I thought it was that guy from the road earlier. He then said, "Okay, here's a flashlight, go find out." I then was skeptical, but I grabbed the flashlight from his hand and went out with Ginger. As soon as I entered the trees, I drew out my gun, clicked off my safety, and pointed the flashlight in the direction of the sticks breaking. Ginger then froze, the hair on the back of stood up, and she then growled a deep growl, and I watched from the back of the tree. The man stepped out. At this point I was thinking to myself, he's fucking stalking us. What the hell do I do? Do I shoot him? Should I demand to see his hands? I just yelled at him, what the fuck did he think he was doing? And then I told him I will shoot if he did not walk the fuck away. Now I at 14 was not very scary, and he looked at me and smiled, and the way he smiled, his decaying teeth was so disgusting, and the way he looked at me like I was nothing, it sent chills down my spine. Ginger then barked very loud and I screamed to my dad, "Help, get the guns." The man then almost tried to lunge at me. I shot it, hit him in the upper shoulder. It did not even seem to stop him. I then turned and ran, Ginger hot on my heels, the man still charging at me. I kept screaming and just running so hard I was so scared, and he did not stop. My dad then ran out of the cab, 9mm in his hand. All he could see was the flashlight going up and down as my arms were pumping, running from the man. I was just about to get to the dirt driveway when another man came from behind the huge boulder. I quickly ducked and the man's eyes were beady, just dark black soles, no pupils like a deer's eye. These men then stopped dead in their tracks. The man behind me told me I better stop. And for some dumb fucking reason I did. I pulled up my gun and shot right above the man that came from behind the rock. He said in a monotone voice that was a mistake. My dad, who rounded the bend of the driveway, he yelled at the men to go or he will shoot. I whirled around, and the man who started the attack shoulder was bleeding, but he did not even notice it. I then told him to back the fuck up or I will drop him. He did nothing of the kind. He just looked at me and smiled that creepy smile again, and which I never should have done, and I regret to this day. I shot him 3 times in the chest. He dropped like a rag doll, just crumpled up on the ground. My dad was distracted after this but kept an eye on the guy, the man that tried to lunge at my father. My dad then shot this guy and he laid on the ground. Still alive, we then ran to the cabin, locked the doors and hid under the stairs. We tried to call the police, but our calls would not go through. We tried and tried, but the calls would not connect. I looked out the door window and saw the man who was behind the rock stood up, blood running down his chest, and from his mouth. He started to run towards the cabin. He slammed into the door, blood was dripped on the window, and he fell to the ground. He then stood up and punched the glass with his fist. It shattered. We were all screaming for him to leave. My dad then pulled his rifle out and shot the man in the head. The way the bullet hit the man, and his head flew back, and he just dropped. Still does not seem real to that. Nothing of that day seems real. The cops then told us that they were not in the system and had no idea of who they are to this day. We have not gone back to the cabin, and the men are still not identified. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, hit that like button to support my work. And as always, enjoy the fear, my dear.